All right, we're going to talk about the top 5 things you must fix if you want to massively improve your win rate at poker. Let's go. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about, and I know you hear me preach it a lot, but it's actually memorize your pre-flop charts. Having a good understanding in this day and age of poker is no longer good enough. And the reason is because everyone studied a little bit. Everyone has some idea of ranges and what they should be doing pre-flop. So if you actually want to have an edge, you have to know more than that, right? Luckily, there's a ton of free charts out there. But I will say this, you want to be careful where you're getting those charts, because with the advent of solvers and the progression of solvers, these charts are changing and they're not the same. The other thing you need to be careful of is different factors that change what your range should be. You need to make sure you are studying charts that are applicable to the actual games you're playing. Here's what I mean. So a couple of things that are the biggest factors that change your range. Number one is going to be the number of players at the table. So your range in heads up, for example, is damn near all the hands, right? Versus 9 max is your a much tighter range. And then obviously, you know, the range changes based on position, but we're not talking about that. That's for no matter what game you're playing. But what we're going to talk about is it changes because of the number of players. So if it's heads up, is it 6 max? Is it 9 max? Is it 7 max with antes? You know, that kind of thing, right? The other thing that really impacts your ranges are going to be the rake structure of the game. So the higher the rake, the tighter we have to play and the less calling we get to do in position. And so like in an environment like a live low stakes game, like a 1-2 or a 1-3 cash game with high rake, that's going to be where most people are just adopting a 3-bet or fold strategy for the most part. You're going to have to play much tighter ranges because of the rake, right? And the reason we want to 3-bet more in games like that is because when there's no flop, there's no drop. AKA, if you take the pot down before the flop gets there, the casino doesn't get any money, right? And you get to keep it all and there's no rake, which is a huge win. So luckily, there's a great tool for this that you can plug in the information of your game, whether, you know, is it 6 max, is it 9 max, what is the rake structure? And the solver will give you this information. It'll give you the charts and you can just memorize them. You can print them. You can do whatever you want. And it's completely free. It's GTO Wizard. So let's hop on into GTO Wizard and let me quick show you guys how to do that. Also, if you do want to use GTO Wizard, there's a link in the description of this video. Use that, sign up, and let's get to studying. All right, guys. So here we are. We're inside of GTO Wizard. And I know it looks like there's a lot of information coming at you here, but if you're just looking for the pre-flop charts, it's pretty simple. What you're going to do is you're going to go to study right here. And we're going to click that, and that's going to bring us into what I had open in the past, right? So if you want the first thing, before you look at any of this, the first thing you got to do is you want to go over here to settings. And then from here, you want to set everything correctly. So if you're playing just a normal cash game, we're going to go to classic, right? Classic. And then let's say it's a 9 max game, right? So it's like a live casino. And then over here in rake, we're going to go rake 10%, right? Which is what most live games are. And a lot of times live games, you're going to have a stack depth, a bigger stack depth. So 200 big blinds, 150 big blinds, 100 big blinds, whatever it is. Let's just take the 200 big blind live rake. So this is your range. So right here, you can see the position. So under the gun, if you're playing a 200 big blind game and it's 10% rake, right? Like a live, and it's 9 players in the game. So this is under the gun. This is what you should be opening. This is the range. Okay. And if you want to see under the gun +1 right here, this is the range, you know, under the gun 2, low jack, high jack, cut off, button, and small blind, right? And so these are the opening ranges. Now, so this is the first thing you memorize. So then after that, what you'll do is you go say, let's say under the gun opens. So now I'm in under the gun +1. What am I 3-betting with? Okay, well, here's what I'm 3-betting with. All the red is 3-bet. If under the gun, if they fold, then you're under the gun +2, and you're going to do the same thing. If under the gun is open, you're under the gun +2. Right? Low jack, high jack, cut off, button, small blind, all the same stuff, right? So now let's go back over here. Let's say they fold. Let's say under the gun +1 opens, you're under the gun +2. Okay, this is your 3-bet range. This is the low jack's 3-bet range against the under the gun +1 open. Right? You're going to do the same thing. You go all the way through. And you can do the same thing for if under the gun +1 folds, but under the gun +2 opens, then this is the low jack 3-bet. Jack 3-bet, so on and so forth, right? So they fold, do the same thing. It goes, and you just memorize all of it. And if you want to test yourself, what you can do, if you go back over here, you want to test to figure out where you're at, you go to the trainer, And in the trainer, what's very important is you set the settings to be the exact same as we were just practicing, right? So I'm not going to reset everything up, but let's just say that this was what we wanted to work on. The opening size was, we'll go 2, and effective stack's 100 big blinds. Rake is NL50. And then we'll do preflop only for this because that's all we're trying to memorize. And we'll say it's a 6 max that we're trying to memorize. We'll click confirm. Let me make sure I don't have any other weird settings on here. I do not. Okay. So raise first in is good. And then what you'll do is you'll say, okay, hero position. If I'm just working my under the gun open, I just want to memorize that right now. We'll go hero position is under the gun. That's the only one that's selected. GTO opponent doesn't matter. And you'll see why here in a second. Everything else is good. We'll click start training. The last thing we want to look at is over on this, you're going to see you have full hand, street, or spot. We want to practice for this is just spot. And what that's going to do is if over here, if we're going to do this, so this is a fold, right? We're going to fold ace-4 off. Okay. So the reason that you want to go to spot is because if this isn't spot, right? If I click raise here, because that's what I'm supposed to do, what would happen is if it wasn't spot, it would then go through the other motions and say, if someone else 3-bets you, then what do? Action will be back on you. We don't care about that. We're only focusing on memorizing the under the gun open range. So this is this is the easiest way to memorize it. And like what you can really do while you're just memorizing, study those charts. And then when you're ready to kind of like get going, open 2 different tabs of GTO Wizard. Open your chart on one side and then the position trainer on the other. And just look at that one chart if you have any questions and do that. And then play like 1,000 hands that way until it's memorized and move on to the other positions. That's the best way I can say to memorize. It's the only caveat to that is I will say, in order to use this trainer, you only get 10 hands per day for free. So you would need, and I highly recommend it. It's $49 a month. It is well worth the investment, but it's highly recommended. Pay the upgraded subscription to GTO Wizard, because if you do, then you can do unlimited hands in this trainer and it's very easy to memorize this stuff. So that's the first thing we need to fix is you need to memorize your preflop charts. Guys, if you've been finding this valuable, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get back to it. Once you've got the preflop charts down, the next thing we're going to start working on is your bet sizing, both preflop and postflop. For preflop, it's fairly straightforward and it's very easy to remember. Like it's super easy. I'm going to tell you right now what you need to do preflop for sizing. So preflop, every position that you play, everything besides cutoff, the button, the small blind, and the big blind. Obviously, the big blind you can't open because if everyone folds, you just win the pot. Besides those positions, all of the other positions, you're going to open to 2 big blinds. Yes, I said it, 2 big blinds. And this includes for live games as well. The only caveat to that where you can open bigger than the 2 big blinds is if it's a very deep stack game, because then you're not committing a large percentage of your stack just to open the pot, right? The reason you still only open to 2 big blinds, even in live games, no matter what other people are doing, it doesn't matter what other people do. The reason you only open to 2 is because if you're playing 100 big blinds deep, you don't want to open to like 5 big blinds. Like a lot of people are open to 5 big blinds in live cash. Well, if you're opening to 5 big blinds, the problem is then you need to play a very, very nitty range, because you cannot be folding to 3-bets if you're already committing 5 big blinds of your stack out of 100. And so what that means is you have to play ridiculously nitty tight. And so the reason that it doesn't matter about what other people are doing is because this, in theory, is correct. It doesn't matter what other people do. And so you still open to 2 big blinds. Yes, even in live, no matter what other people are laughing at you, snickering, it doesn't fucking matter. Just take their money. Open to 2 big blinds from every position. So you're under the gun, you open to 2 big blinds. Under the gun +1, 2 big blinds, everything. Until you get to the cutoff. Once you get to the cutoff, you open to 2.5 big blinds. And then from the button, you open to 3 big blinds. And then the small blind, you open to 3 as well. Now, some people ask, what if someone limps? And that is true. When someone limps, you do adjust. For each limper, you add half a big blind. So let's say under the gun +1 limps and you're in the cutoff, instead of opening to 2.5 big blinds, you would open to 3 big blinds. And then as far as 3-bets, so your 3-bet sizing, this does assume other people are opening to the correct sizing. So if someone opens to 2, and you want to 3-bet, you 3-bet to 8. Now you do in proportion scale that up. So if their open is bigger, your 3-bet is going to be proportionally bigger as well. But in theory, if they open to 2 big blinds, then you're going to 3-bet to 8 big blinds. except in the small blind. In the small blind, you go to 10 big blinds, and in the big blind, you go to 12 big blinds. That is for pre-flop. Now for post-flop, your sizing is going to be different, and it's going to be nuanced based on board texture, positional awareness, and many other things. And so with that, you do need to go into the GTO Wizard and study and learn about bet sizing based on positions and based on different board textures. But for pre-flop, that's it. And you don't change your bet sizing based on relative strength of the hand. Because if you do that, people are going to start to understand what hands you have. And so the reason we keep the bet sizing the same is because we want to remain balanced. Because if we are balanced, we are unexploitable. So the third thing is going to be positional awareness. And positional awareness, it's pretty simple, but it is massively important. So basically, positional awareness is just the understanding that playing in position is more valuable than almost anything in poker. Like, you want to play in position always, if possible. And it's so much so that old poker theory would dictate under the gun, you open to a bigger sizing. So you would open to like 3 big blinds under the gun and like 2 on the button. The reason and the theory for that was that, okay, under the gun, you have a stronger range. Like when we were looking at those range charts on GTO, we're playing many less hands under the gun. And so we're going to be weighted more towards premium hands when we're under the gun. And so we're like, we want to put more money in with better hands, right? I mean, it makes some sense when you think about it. However, with the advent of solvers getting better and better, what they found is that actually it's better even if you're playing worse hands, it's more advantageous to play in position. And so even if you're playing worse hands, it's better to put more money in the pot in late position because you're going to win more money, even if you're playing worse hands. And so that alone should ring a bell in your head and be like, oh shit, position is crazy important. And there's a reason you really don't see crushers just flatting and calling hardly ever from the small blind. And the reason is because if you do that, A, you're playing it passively, and B, you're playing it passively out of position, which is incredibly bad. Like, do not flat from the small blind. Are there, like, I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments saying, oh, well, this specific like thing you should. And yes, there are very specific and nuanced times where you want to flat from the small blind, depending on rake structure, there's a lot of factors that might make that a thing. But keep in mind, the small EV edge you get by doing that, it's very, very small. And when you do it in the wrong spots, the EV that you lose is massive. And so unless you're at that level where you're worried about like 0.1% of an EV edge, right? Don't worry about it, right? That's like someone who just started cycling and they're like, oh, I need to buy this $20,000 carbon fiber bike because it's going to give me an edge. Like, no, lose your belly. That will give you a lot more of an edge than your carbon fiber versus an aluminum bike, right? It's the same thing. Like, just don't worry about that right now. You've got a lot of other things to fix before you even start worrying about that stuff. So the long story short of that is just worry about playing more hands in position and less out of position. If you're on the fence of whether you should call or fold, do more calling in position and just overfold out of position. It'll save you a lot of heartache. Okay, so number 4 is going to be understanding range advantage and equity advantage. And they're not the same. There's an important distinction. A lot of times, if you have the range advantage, you're going to have the equity advantage as well, but not always. So let me give you a scenario where range advantage and equity advantage are not going to be one and the same. Well, they're never one and the same, but usually the person who has the range advantage is also going to have the equity advantage. Let's say hero is under the gun and they open to 2 big blinds. Everyone folds, but the big blind defends. We go to the flop and the flop is 3, 6, 7. Okay. If you go to that flop, let's look at what the ranges are. So if you think about the range where under the gun is opening, and you think about what cards is he opening that interacts with that board, and it's almost none. He has the range advantage because his overall starting hands are going to be stronger. He's going to have pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens. The big blind doesn't have any of that because if he had those, he would have 3-bet. However, the big blind has the equity advantage, because the big blind has all the 2 pairs, they have all the sets, they have all of that kind of stuff. And so the equity advantage would actually be to the big blind and not to the under the gun player. And so it is an important distinction to make that the range advantage and equity advantage are not the same thing. And those are 2 things that you must think about in every single hand of poker that you play. And if you are not thinking about those things, it means you are not thinking about poker correctly as of yet. So let's get you thinking about poker correctly, because the one thing that you can do to massively improve your poker game is think about the game correctly. The problem is there's no way to just make a switch and think about the game correctly. You have to learn all of these things in order to have your brain switch and think about the game correctly. And the last thing is going to be mental game and tilt control. Guys, a lot of people, myself included for a long time, if you go sit down at a poker table and you're playing your A game, you're like crushing people's souls, everything is going well, and you feel like you are a god at poker, right? And then you play your B game or C game and you're just fucking, everyone's grandma could beat you, right? And if that's you, it's mostly going to be a mental game issue. And so luckily, there are a lot of good resources out there for controlling your mental game in poker. And one thing I should state, that controlling your mental game in poker isn't necessarily directly related to poker. This is just about psychology. And so there's a guy by the name of Jared Tendler, and he's a sports psychologist. And he actually wrote a book called The Mental Game of Trading. And that was in regards to day trading for, day traders who lose money as well. And they go on quote unquote tilt as well. But he also wrote a book called The Mental Game of Poker. And it is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. And in fact, it is the only poker book that I recommend. The reason I don't recommend any other poker strategy type books is because with solvers that they're changing so fast and theory is changing so fast. Within a couple of years of poker strategy books coming out, they're no longer effective. And if you start implementing those strategies, you're going to get crushed by guys like me who are studying solvers. So guys, I highly recommend that you read the book, The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler. And just remember that no matter what happens at the poker table, it doesn't matter. And so let me define what I mean by that a little bit. When you sit down at the poker table, you have to disconnect yourself from the results. If you are someone that sits at the poker table and you're like, I have to book a win, right? That is a very bad mindset for poker. Another key indicator that someone has bad tilt control or bad emotional management at the poker table is you'll see people who they're up a bunch of money and then they start playing really, really tight, or they're racking up but they still want to get dealt hands, but then they start playing differently and they play really tight because they want to quote unquote preserve their stack. And this is not something you will see crushers do. And the reason is because we understand that in any given hand, any given session, any given week, any given month, any given year, the results are irrelevant. In the short term, variance rules results. You can be an amazing poker player and lose for an extended period of time. And so if you start changing the way you're playing based on the results you're getting, it is only going to make that variance last longer. Okay. And so the first thing you can do to help with your mental control is disconnect yourself from the results of that day's poker session. You need to go into the session with the mindset that I'm going to play my best A game poker and I do not care whether I win or lose money today, because it does not matter. Poker is one long session. What happens in any given session does not matter. And if it matters to you, it means one of two things. It means you're not thinking about the game correctly, or you're playing outside of your bankroll. If you are going to the poker table and you have to win today, that is a setup for failure. You cannot go to the poker table and think about the money. If you do that, you will lose long term. You need to play with proper bankroll management. And if you cannot do that and you don't have the proper bankroll and you're not in a place where you have enough data for someone to back you, and you need to not play poker. Now, there is an amazing thing called online poker, right? So if you're going to play live cash, you need it's 1-2, you need 40 buy-ins in your poker bankroll. And this means set aside directly for poker. It means you have 6 months of living expenses set aside in a different account, and your poker bankroll, you need 40 buy-ins. 40 buy-ins of 100 big blinds is $200 a big blind, or $200 per buy-in at 1-2. And so you need $8,000 in your bankroll. And if you don't have that, do not play 1-2, period. Okay. Now, if this isn't your full-time thing, you have other income, that's a different scenario. But if you're just playing poker, you should not be playing 1-2 if you have less than $8,000 set aside only for poker. So you're not paying any bills out of that money. You're not doing anything besides buying into poker games with that money. That's it. And so one amazing thing about online is it's very easy to, as your bankroll goes up and down, to follow stakes. You can move up in stakes, move down in stakes. because online you can play all the way down to like 1 cent, 2 cent. And I would not recommend playing those stakes because the rake is just killer at those stakes. But you can go down and play like 10 NL, and at 10 NL, like it's like what, $400 for 40 buy-ins. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, if you have $400, why are you going to play 1-2? It's insanity. Don't do that. Go play online. There's plenty of games. And like, people will tell me, it's like, oh, well, it's not as fun. I don't enjoy it. Well, okay. You're trying to be a professional poker player. It's not about enjoyment. And the reality of this is, in this day and age, it is not easy. It is going to take real work. Just because it's not a traditional job doesn't mean it's not work. And it is hyper competitive. There are people like me out there, a lot of us, that spend hours every day studying. And so if you're not willing to do that, pack your shit up and stop playing poker. All right, guys. So with all of that said, those are the 5 things that you should fix immediately if you have not done so, to help elevate your win rate immediately. If that's been helpful, again, please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as sign up for a free account at levelxpoker.com. We offer free GTO courses. We have a free weekly study group, and we do offer one-on-one coaching if that's something that you are interested in and you meet the current requirements to become a client, because we don't accept everyone. So if you are interested in any of that, head over to the website, lvlxpoker.com, and I will see you on the felt.